Welcome back to our Looking Forward with Workday series. Today we're joined by our colleagues in the US who will introduce themselves shortly. Just some housekeeping before we begin. All lines are muted and will remain so throughout the session. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens for our speakers to refer back to at the end. If we do happen to run out of time, we will get back to you individually via email. And if anyone has any technical difficulties, please do use the chat box to chat to me. And with that, over to you, Ahmed.
Great, thank you, Lauren, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Unlocking the Strategic Value of Procurement with High Performance Sourcing. So my name is Ahmed Jawani, and I'm part of the product marketing team here at Scout RFP. And I just wanted to take a quick moment before we start to give a special thanks to everyone who's joining us today. We hope that you and your families are staying safe and healthy, and we recognize that these are unusually difficult times, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us. So this webinar is part of the Looking Forward with Workday webinar series, which is really designed to give you insight into how your organization can do more with Workday, including additional ways we support how you manage your people and your business. And just before we begin, I do have to call attention to our safe harbor statement, as this presentation will contain some forward-looking statements which are subject to change. And so I've already introduced myself, and joining me today is Kyle Worley, and he's one of our solution consultants on the Scout team as well. And he's going to provide us with a great demo of the Scout platform later on in the presentation. And let's take a quick look at our agenda for today. So I'm going to start us off and spend some time covering talking a little bit about Workday's foundation and procurement, specifically on the procure-to-pay side, and we'll talk through some of our capabilities there. And then this will then lead us into a discussion around our recent acquisition of Scout RFP and how that allows us to really provide more of a comprehensive source-to-pay solution for our customers. And then that is when Kyle will join us for a solution demo. And then we'll wrap up and hopefully address any of the questions that you may have as well. So again, as Lauren mentioned, please feel free to include any questions that you have in the Q&A box. So let's go ahead and get started. So I think many of us on the call are familiar with this long-established procure-to-pay process that really supports how organizations purchase goods and services, especially on the indirect side, which is really the field that Workday plays in. And this process is really foundational to the financial health and just really the overall competitive strength of an organization, and one that Workday has really supported for over the last 10 plus years within our broader financial management offering. And just to give you a sense of what that looks like within the context of our broader platform, we really have spend management as a dedicated pillar today. So we've really elevated that and really have, especially over the last year, decided to put quite a bit of investment in this area. And really, when we fast forward to today, on the Workday procurement side, really the product that helps manage that procure-to-pay process, we have over 750 customers that have chosen that particular application to really help automate their procurement functions and really kind of transform the way that they plan, execute, analyze, and extend within the context of our broader platform, as you can see here. And as I mentioned, this continued trajectory has really resulted in the emergence of the spend management pillar, if you will, to really support our future development plans within this solution area. So let's take a moment to drill into the capabilities that we have in our solution today from a procure-to-pay standpoint, just so that we're all familiar with, again, kind of the foundation that we're coming from before we start talking about the rationale for Scout and kind of our investment in that area. So the first thing is really catalog and item management. So this is configuring and maintaining your items and supplier catalogs that can be made available for during the requisitioning process. which then kind of leads us into the next step, which is the shop and request step. And this is really the self-service requisitioning of goods and services, which can either be done from catalogs or non-catalog requests as well. And within this step, we support things like punch out to third-party sites, whatever those might be here in the US. Some of those common sites are companies like Staples and Office Depot, but of course we can configure punch out to other sites as well. And then all requisitions go through our business process framework, which allows customers to configure, review, and approval based on their organization's purchasing policies. The third step, purchase and receive. So this is really sourcing requisitions to purchase orders and communicating POs to suppliers through a variety of dispatching methods. And then for receiving, we support the creation of receipts on both desktop and mobile devices, and we can support 2- and 3-way matching against the PO, invoice, and receipt as well. This fourth step here, inventory management, I should quickly call out that we do also have an inventory management solution which helps you stock, track, and replenish all of those indirect goods that may be coming from procurement. And then finally, invoice and pay. So this is where, again, we support PO and non-PO invoice creation, as well as payment of those invoices through our settlement engine on the Workday side. And really all of this functionality is supported by, again, all the controls and policies that you need to ensure that all transactions are accounted for and that all workflows are easily configurable as well. So while we've built a fairly robust procure-to-pay offering, our journey doesn't end here. We recognize that there's a need to continue to evolve alongside the procurement function, which we've seen has really seen some dramatic changes over the past several years. And again, many folks that are on the call that are either within procurement or maybe work very closely with procurement leaders, I'm sure you can attest to the fact that many of these leaders are now expected to be more strategic in their roles and really contribute sustainable competitive advantages in areas such as sourcing and supplier management. So really shifting from, traditional notions of kind of tactical or reactive buying all the way to kind of more strategic procurement. So once things are, you kind of have the right foundation in place, looking at more strategic activities such as, again, sourcing and supplier management, where you can be a little bit more proactive and strategic in strengthening relationships with suppliers, putting contingency plans in place, potentially if you have the ability to segment suppliers and, also do rationalization exercises, things of that nature. So, we really are seeing this function go from, again, kind of that just general support function to really being one of the most important functions within an organization, especially as we've seen, over the past 6 months, how procurement has really been called to the forefront to really help their organizations, thrive in times of disruption. But what we've also seen is that in many cases, when we speak to some of our prospects, that the function has typically lacked capabilities that they need to be strategic. And this is just a couple of quick stats to demonstrate that. So a recent Gartner report I pulled this stat from basically noted that 75% of procurement executives consider displacing low-value activities to spend more time working with business partners as an urgent issue. So again, we are seeing the need to have procurement be a better business partner and really strengthen their relationships with all lines of business. Another one here is 74%, this is from another report from Hackett, 74% of respondents acknowledge the importance of obtaining more value from existing suppliers through things like supplier relationship management. But only 51%, really have a low or moderate ability to meet this objective. And then finally, another report from Deloitte basically noted that 65% of procurement leaders really don't have the level of visibility that they need beyond their tier 1 or their most strategic suppliers. So they don't have a full grasp on their entire supply base. And again, in times of need, when you may have to shift plans or maybe have a contingency plan in place to navigate to other supply sources of supply, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do for a lot of organizations or a lot of procurement functions today. So how can we then up-level, right, the procurement function to reach the strategic aspirations? So we talked a little bit before around, you know, Workday's foundation in procurement, and where we really started in helping our customers kind of streamline that procure to pay process. You know, whether we look at requisitions, the ability to manage purchase orders, you know, inventory, payables, but really it's through this concept of an evolved kind of source to pay process, right? So this encompasses more upstream parts of strategic sourcing, contracts, supplier management, supplier performance. All of these things very much complement our existing solution set, but, you know, allow us to broaden our reach to allow customers, again, to just be a little bit more strategic in some of those upstream functions. So as many of you may already be aware, you know, we announced our acquisition and closed our acquisition of Scout RFP late last year. And, you know, really Scout RFP is a market-leading sourcing and supplier engagement platform that is really built on, you know, modern technology principles and really focused on putting the users at the center of the experience, you know, whether that be immediate users on the sourcing team, whether it be stakeholders throughout the business, or whether it be the suppliers that you're ultimately transacting with. And hopefully this becomes a little bit more clear as we dive a little bit deeper into the platform, and as we see the product, we see a live demonstration of the product, and you can get a better sense of the simplicity and ease of use that Scout was really built upon. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the Scout platform. So as I mentioned, Scout really is a best-of-breed solution that helps manage the end-to-end kind of source to contract piece that kind of sits upstream, as I mentioned in a previous slide. And just to give you a little backstory on Scout, so Scout was founded just over 5 or 6 years ago. And when the company started out, the original founding members actually started off in an online food service business, and they were suppliers frequently responding to, you know, RFPs, RFIs, and in their experience, the process was just very cumbersome, very tedious. And so after they sold off their first company, before they even you know, did anything from a product perspective on the Scout side, they went out and interviewed over 300 procurement experts to really just understand what the pain points and the challenges were that existed throughout the entire sourcing process. And they took all that feedback, and again, they really decided to put Scout together based on principles of ease of use, high adoption, quick time to value. And the very first module that they came out with was the sourcing module, sourcing and auctions area, which is kind of which is dead center of this platform slide here. And this really encompasses the ability to manage, again, all of your RFX events, as well as reverse auctions, but doing so in a way that just really helps to cut down on traditional cycle times for drafting RFX events or conducting auctions. And again, we're going to see that when we dive into the demo a little bit later. But then along the way, after we introduced the sourcing module, we got some additional feedback from customers around some other areas that, you know, basically some other requirements that procurement leaders had. And a couple of those areas included things like intake. So really allowing the business to easily submit sourcing project requests that could then get routed to somebody on the procurement or sourcing team for follow-up. So that's kind of where our intake module was born, and it basically acts as a ticketing system for the business to be able to manage all of their project requests. And then pipeline is really procurement and sourcing's tool to manage that entire pipeline of sourcing projects. So they can prioritize projects, they can track how they're doing against their savings metrics in a real-time fashion, and that can then trickle into really running sourcing events as well. And then if we look to the far right of the slide, so we also then came out with a contracts module, which really acts as a central repository to help operationalize obligations and contracts and really help put those into motion. And then our supplier management area as well, which encompasses both aspects of onboarding, so the ability to quickly onboard suppliers, gather the necessary information from them, but then also continuously assessing that supplier information to make sure that they're in compliance, and then also performance management as well. So the ability to collaborate with suppliers on quarterly business reviews, putting development plans in place, just to make sure that that level of collaboration, keeps up and that you are continuing to strengthen those relationships as well. Now, everything that gets entered into the platform, can be reported on, which is really great. And we also talked about savings tracking, which is kind of embedded within the pipeline area. And again, Kyle can give you a closer look into what that looks like as we dig into the demo. And then one other thing I want to call out is, from an API perspective, we recognize the need to, in many cases, integrate with other back office systems, P2P solutions, BI tools, and so we do allow you to do so. And we have a couple of out-of-the-box integrations today for on the BI side. We have integrations to Power BI and Tableau. And then we will also talk a little bit about our integrations on the Workday side in just a couple of slides as well. I also just wanted to quickly show you a snapshot of some of our global customers throughout the really the EMEA and APJ regions. And this isn't a full comprehensive list, but just a couple of key brands to give you a sense of kind of our presence across verticals, across different, organization sizes globally. So a couple of customers include, Lloyd's of London, Spotify, Seadrill, among many others. And we're, of course, continuing to grow our global customer community as well. I also want to just quickly touch on the value that Scout customers are realizing by using our solution. Here are just a couple of quick stats that we often see within our community. So most of the time, we usually see that the majority of our customers are able to see really great ROI within the first year, in most cases around 10x ROI. So they're definitely, in most cases, able to to pay for the Scout platform in just over a little bit of time, and definitely see that return on investment really quick, as well as things like seeing just, again, generally an overall positive cash impact to the bottom line. And one of our favorites on the Scout side is the fact that a lot of customers as well are able to launch their first event within a week of sign up. And that is something that is very common within our community of customers. And then I also just wanted to quickly highlight our kind of placement and positioning within Gartner Peer Insights. And for those of you that are unfamiliar, Gartner Peer Insights is a peer review platform where customers that are using solutions from various technology providers can go into the tool, provide their ratings, their feedback. And within the strategic sourcing area of applications, Scout RFP is actually regarded as really the highest rated and top reviewed strategic sourcing platform, not just in terms of the rating, but also just in terms of the number of reviews as well. And we're quite a bit over 100 reviews at this point. And so it's just something that we're very proud of, that our customers are taking the time out of their busy lives to to use a tool like Gartner Peer Insights and, again, just kind of showcase the value and success that they're experiencing by using Scout. Now, I also want to spend just a second to touch on, we talked about kind of elevating our existing capabilities of procure to pay with the acquisition of Scout, but I just want to kind of build that out for you in a diagram here again, just to give you a better sense of, what that looks like. So, so really we talked about how Scout handles more of the upstream source to contract function. So Scout can really be used again as kind of a single point of entry to, for somebody from the business or a stakeholder to come in, maybe create a sourcing project request, or perhaps it's a sourcing user that is, working primarily in pipeline, that's kind of managing and prioritizing that pipeline of projects. That then trickles into your sourcing and auctions, then your contracts, supplier management, and then eventually that then can carry into, the 4 or 5 areas that we talked about on the procure to pay side. So everything from catalog and item management all the way down to invoice and pay. So Scout is really helping to bridge this process for, again, the strategic procurement team that's really focused on identifying and managing relationships with the right suppliers and really providing the right level of engagement with the business as well to better partner with those folks. Now, the other thing I also wanted to just mention here is that, we often get asked, so where can I start as a customer? Maybe I'm relatively new to procurement on the Workday side or maybe on the sourcing side. I think it boils down to the fact that we can support customers on whatever journey they take, whether they want to start off, by deploying Scout and really seeing that quick time to value and getting up and running with sourcing quickly, and then potentially looking towards maybe procure to pay in the future. We also have several customers that are existing procurement customers that are deciding to now use Scout as well. So whichever path a customer takes, we can easily support them on their procurement transformation journey. And then lastly, I just wanted to quickly say as well that our Power of One strategy is really in full gear with the acquisition of Scout. To really, in order to integrate business processes, security frameworks, and the overall experience to really ensure a seamless experience for our customers. And of course, that's a journey that takes a little bit of time, but something that is definitely still top of mind and something that we are actively working towards. So let's take a look at the integration opportunities that exist between Workday and Scout. So, again, this isn't something that is, representative of everything that we're working on today. Again, I just want to set the record straight that this is just something that we are looking at across the 2 systems in terms of how do we prioritize and define some of the important use cases for our customers. So today, I just want to quickly mention that we have a bi-directional integration between Scout and Workday to sync supplier data. But again, we're continuing to evaluate other touch points. So for example, we have things like unified onboarding on our roadmap, as well as a contracts integration, which I'll go into a little bit more detail on in the next couple of slides. But a couple of other areas that we're looking into, for example, is, let's just say things like creating requisitions in Workday, whether it's requisitions, purchase orders, supplier contracts in Workday from awarded Scout sourcing events, or potentially things like pushing requisitions from Workday into Scout's intake module to then determine what sourcing activity may be required. So again, this is just an ongoing exercise where we are vetting this with customers. We're trying to understand all of their requirements that exist today. And again, if they had to prioritize, what would that important list of integrations look like? So as I mentioned, unified onboarding is one of the things that we are working on that we're planning to deliver later this year. And, as the name of the feature suggests, we're really planning to unify the onboarding of new suppliers in Scout, and then really have that automatically create approved supplier records in Workday with the information needed to operationalize those suppliers in the source to pay flow. So from a process standpoint, supplier initiation and onboarding forms would be completed via Scout, and then would go through our business process framework in Workday for approval. And really, this just kind of helps remove the need to manually create and maintain separate records between the 2 systems. And this really is one of the top use cases requested from our customers, and one that we're very excited to deliver later this year as well. And then just quickly touching on the contracts integration as well. So this is something where, again, if we take a look at kind of the planned process flow, is really to have, an initial contract created and approved in Scout, and then we could push that contract and the details of that contract through to Workday to really execute requisitions and purchase orders against that contract. And, any amendments down the line could be done through Scout and again, carried over to Workday so that the information is shared and updated on a continuous basis. And again, this is something that we're planning to release later on this year as well. Again, I just want to say between these forward-looking things, again, safe harbor applies, but this is where our current plans stand in terms of our kind of short-term plans for integrations as well. Okay, so I know we covered quite a bit in that upfront portion, but now I want to turn it over to Kyle Worley, who's going to take us through the Scout platform with a demo. So Kyle, over to you.
Perfect. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen now. For today's demo, we are going to cover pipeline, sourcing, and supplier management within the platform. And I want to start the demo by taking a look at the pipeline dashboard. So pipeline is going to be the project management and savings tracking component in Scout. It's going to bring a lot of visibility into what's going on throughout the various teams. We want to know what everyone is working on, what projects we have coming up, and we'll use this data to help us prioritize projects and events. So here I'm logged in the pipeline as Teresa Serrano, and Teresa is a procurement manager within the organization. And the first thing you'll notice about Teresa's homepage are these savings styles up top. So Scout's going to allow you to track against identified revenue, realized revenue, and how you're doing towards your annual savings goal in real time from your homepage. And in a minute, we'll jump into a project. I'll show you how the numbers get fed into here. The next thing you'll notice is that Teresa has full visibility into the status of all of her projects, whether it's a new project request, something that needs attention. Here we have a project with a slipping timeline, active projects, or upcoming opportunities. So we really want to focus on visibility within our pipeline dashboard. And it's important to note here that this is a team-based view. So in my demo environment right now, I have it set where Teresa can see all projects across the entire procurement organization. This can very easily be segmented by team. So whether you segment by indirect versus direct, or by category, by region, it's all easily done within our admin portal. So that way, when your users log in, they can only see the projects that are pertinent to them. We can also filter the dashboard here. So any data point that we're capturing in Scout, we can choose as a filter. So if you want to see projects by a specific sourcing owner, or let's say I want to see projects within the IT category, very simple to apply those filters, trim down this project list, find what I'm looking for. You'll also notice that the saving styles up top update dynamically based off of what you're filtering by. So next, let's take a look at a project and see what data we can capture before we go out to a sourcing event. So here I'm going to look at our CRM system RFP. So this is our project details page. So everything you see on the screen, all the fields, all the tabs on the left-hand side are determined by this project type. Just think of it as your project template. And I do want to call out, it's extremely easy to change the layout of your projects. So everything is point and click configuration within the admin portal. So whatever fields you want to see on this page, whatever data points you want to capture, your company administrator can change this within a couple of minutes. Very, very simple to do. Here we have some basic information up top for our project. We can attach any documents. Maybe I have a spec sheet for hardware or a statement of work that I want to include in the bid. And then if I keep scrolling down, this is where we're going to start capturing that spend and savings data. So you can capture your savings here, and this is also completely configurable. You're going to hear me say that a lot today. And if you see an asterisk next to the savings type, that means it's hard savings, and that's going to feed into those dials from the home page. Anything without an asterisk is going to be soft savings, things like cost avoidance. So those don't feed into the dials on the home page. However, they do feed into our reporting module. You can report on them, show the additional value that you're bringing to the business. Within Scout, we have the concept of milestones built in throughout our project and contract management platforms. And milestones are going to be those repeatable steps that every project has to take. We want to know what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and who's accountable for making it happen. And this can all be templatized based off the project type. So here I'm looking at a sourcing project. I know these are the steps that I have to take for every sourcing event. So this can be templatized, so these milestones are automatically generated for me. And this is really to help you stay on task for your activities and make sure none of these critical steps get missed during the workflow process. So as these due dates approach for any milestone, you're going to get an automated reminder both in the system and via email, alerting you that you have a milestone approaching that's not completed yet. This is also a good area to call out team chat. So this is our collaboration tool built into Scout. So as you're working on these projects, when you're communicating with stakeholders, instead of doing that via email, we want all that communication done in team chat here. And the main reason why is that this chat is going to be tied to this project indefinitely. So it leaves a really good audit trail going forward. 2 years from now, I want to know, why I worded the bid a certain way. This would be one of the first places that I check. And next, I want to move into sourcing. But before I do, just to wrap up pipeline, pipeline is going to be our centralized view and single source of truth for projects. I can see everything in a single dashboard and can easily track how we're progressing towards our savings goals. You have a repeatable process for your team. You're going to have strong visibility no matter where your users sit, so that everyone knows what projects are out there, what needs to occur, and who's responsible for next steps. So next, let's move into sourcing. So this is my events tab. This is how we launch a sourcing event and tie it to this project. So when you're creating a new sourcing event, whether it's an auction, an RFI, or RFP, you're able to start those events from scratch, or you can also start from a template and be 80% of the way done within a single click. So for today's example, I went ahead and built out a draft and a completed RFP to showcase. So first, let's dive into our draft. This is our sourcing module. So this is our flagship module. We spent a lot of time ensuring that the RFX process is as painless as possible. And you're able to build your RFX events using 6 easy steps, all from a single screen. And to walk you through this process, step number 1, this is where we're going to set up our event. So this is going to be that boilerplate information, the instructions to your vendors. This can, of course, be templatized. You can attach any files to your bid. And then there are also some additional event options that you can set. So you can change the request type. So here we're looking at an RFP, but maybe it's RFI at first. Again, this is completely configurable to match all your request types you use today in your environment. You can allow late bids. You can actually gate your RFX events with certain terms and conditions that you want your suppliers to agree to before they can even see that event. So here's an example of an NDA I have uploaded. And what will happen is when the supplier gets invited to this bid and they open it up in Scout for the first time, they're going to get a pop-up with this NDA or whatever T's and C's that you set here that they have to agree to before they can see the rest of the bid. So again, this is an option. You don't have to include that, but that is a good gateway document for your RFX events. And then if I want to templatize this going forward, I can do that with a single click here. We're going to set our timeline. The only required timeline is the submission deadline. We're going to invite our suppliers. So these are going to be inherited over from the project, but you can always add or remove suppliers as needed. And we're going to talk about suppliers more in depth here next, next after sourcing. And then here's where we build our response sheet. So this is really the meat of the RFP. So we've got the qualitative portion with the questionnaire. We've got the quantitative portion with worksheets. This is Scout's version of Excel. And we can also specify any accompanying documents that we need our suppliers to upload as part of their bid submission. Things like proof of insurance, executed NDA, anything else we want to specify there. I do want to spend some time on the questionnaire builder because this is an area that our clients see a lot of time savings in. So this is how we build out questionnaires in Scout. So first and foremost, we can templatize questionnaires, make it very simple to add to RFX events. So if I hit add template here, this is going to bring up my template library, things that I've built out. You can have as many different templates as you want. You can categorize these however you want. So for instance, I'm looking at an IT bid right now. So maybe there's a basic set of security questions I have to ask anytime I'm sourcing IT equipment or software. So I can go ahead and templatize those sections, add them with a single click here. Even without templates, it's extremely easy to build out questionnaires within the system. And to give you an example of this, let's go ahead and add a new section to our questionnaire. And we're going to call this feature listing. Since we are sourcing out a CRM system, I went ahead and built out a spreadsheet here with 136 features that I want to know if the CRM platform is going to support. So these are all multiple choice questions. I'll just cut and paste them in here, no formatting necessary. And then for answer options, we'll do yes, no, or not applicable. We'll hit add. And then in a couple of seconds, the system is going to parse out all of that data. We're going to have all 136 questions now implemented into our RFX event. There we go. So the main point I want to get across here is that it's really simple to build out these questionnaires. So if you have things built out in Word and Excel or PDF today, just know that we do support that cut and paste functionality. Very, very simple to get them into Scout. If I go back to our RFP builder here, next I want to quickly show you worksheets. So again, worksheets are going to be our version of Excel. It's going to have the same look, feel, and functionality as Excel. So you can do formulas, you can do VLOOKUPs, you can control visibility for the certain column. So for instance, I can show the supplier this column, mandate that they fill out a column, or we can hide columns from suppliers. So maybe we have pricing from a previous year that we want to load in to use as reference data as we do our bid evaluations. So that's something that I would want to go ahead and plug into my pricing sheet here, but hide it from the supplier. So if you're doing pricing today in Excel, building out worksheets in Scout, again, it's going to feel very similar, same look, feel, functionality. This is also template friendly and cut and paste friendly as well. And then once we have our questionnaires built out, our pricing sheets built, the last piece is going to be to build our scorecards. So just to quickly show you what this looks like, it's going to look very similar to our questionnaire builder. The big difference is now we can add scoring questions. So we have our different sections of our scorecards here. We can assign weights to each section, and then we can also weight each individual question underneath those sections. And when we take a look at the completed RFP, I'll show you how we can use these scorecards as part of our evaluation process. And then finally, we invite our stakeholders. These are going to be inherited over for the project. You can, of course, add or remove people as needed. We can preview the RFP and then publish it out to our suppliers. So let's go ahead and fast forward a couple of weeks. We sent this RFP out and we've received some responses. So this is our completed RFP screen. Here we see we invited 5 suppliers, 4 of them intended to submit bids, and then we received bids from 3 of them. We also have a dedicated messaging center. So as the suppliers are filling this out, if they have any questions, they're able to submit those questions within the portal. You're going to get an email notification letting you know that you have a question waiting for you with a hyperlink, which will take you directly into this RFP. You can answer that supplier back directly. You can also scrub that question and post that Q&A publicly for everyone. You can also assign questions out to members of your team. So maybe you have an IT question that comes in, you go ahead and invite the IT manager to this RFP and then assign that question to him so he knows that he's responsible for responding. If I keep scrolling down, now we want to evaluate our bids. So let's go ahead and hit compare bids. And this is going to bring up a side-by-side evaluation for all of our responses. So the first section we can take a look at are our questionnaire responses. So here we see all of the answers from the 3 suppliers that responded to this RFP. So one of the first things that I would do, you can hit highlight differences. And now the only questions that are going to be bolded are where you have a difference in answer on. So for example, for question number 1 here, for allowing administrator access, We see that Nalmex said no. This could be very important to me, so I can go ahead and request a bid update, see if this is something they can budge on. I can reject their bid outright, or I can just simply remove them from my view. Same thing on the pricing sheet side. So we're going to have that side-by-side comparison of all of the different pricing. So here we see that CloudForce is about $20,000 more total than ProTech here. So I want to run some basic analytics to understand why. So maybe I want to highlight the lowest cost by hourly rate. And now we see that CloudForce, even though they're $20,000 more, they're only more expensive on a single line item here for engineering services. So again, this is something that I can go ahead and come in, request a bid update, let them know they're way out of the ballpark for this line item, see if they can sharpen their pencils. As I'm doing this side-by-side comparison, if I hit open evaluations, this is going to bring up my scorecards. So here I want to go ahead and evaluate ProTech. I'm looking at pricing right now, so I'll open up the pricing and financial section of my scorecard, and then I'll grade the supplier based off the criteria that I set up previously. And finally, once you have those scorecards filled out, the last thing I want to show you is going to be the scorecard summary screen. So those scorecards are going to get tallied up, and a numerical score is going to be assigned out to each supplier. So here we see that ProTech is winning with 93%. I can always dive deeper into the scorecard, into the individual sections and questions that we set up to see what my stakeholders rated each of these areas. So once I'm happy with my scoring, the final piece is to come in here and we can award this bid out to the supplier or suppliers that have won it. So just to wrap up sourcing, before we move on to supplier management, this is where we can create RFX events from a template or from scratch using 6 easy steps all within a single screen. I'm able to get responses back in a centralized platform, instantly compare them side by side with built-in analytics, and easily decide on the best supplier to award my business to. So the final thing I want to talk about today is how we manage suppliers in Scout. So I want to go over what can you do in Scout versus what can you do in Workday, and how do the platforms complement each other. And at a high level, it's pretty simple. So Workday is going to be the vendor master responsible for transactions and compliance against these suppliers, while Scout is going to focus on supplier onboarding, performance reviews, and action plans. So this is our supplier directory in Scout. This is kept in sync with Workday via pre-built connector, which does a bi-directional sync of the vendor master. So that way suppliers are always kept up to date, no matter which system you are working in. Just like in pipeline, we can apply filters to these views. So let's say I want to only see preferred suppliers. Something I can easily filter by, find the supplier that I'm looking for. So most of what I want to show you within the supplier management suite is going to be tied to the individual supplier profile. So let's go ahead and open up ProTech here and dive in. So there are a couple of tabs on the left-hand side that we're going to take a look at. And this first tab we're looking at is the general supplier profile. So this is going to tell me all the important metadata data points that I want to capture for this supplier. Things like their approval status, their segmentation tier, their risk score. We've got some basic supplier information here. Here we do support tagging, so you can go ahead and tag those suppliers based off of the commodity or the service that they're providing for easy access. We saw that from the previous screen, we can use filters to quickly pull up these lists by tags. And then if I keep scrolling down, this is the configurable field section of our general profile. So things like demographic data, supplier diversity, security, anything that you want to capture, track, and report on for your suppliers, we can configure and capture here. So you will see this little flag icon next to some of these fields, and it says it's auto-filled from a form. So we're going to talk about forms and supplier onboarding here in a second, but just know that you're able to send forms out to suppliers, and when they submit those forms within the portal, we can map that form data back to the general profile here. So it's just a really easy way to always keep this supplier information up to date. We have our activities tab here. This is going to give us a full 360 view of all the activities surrounding the supplier in Scout. So it's going to show us every single project they've been invited to. And this is broken down by project type. We can see any contracts we have uploaded for this supplier, as well as any events they participated in. So for example, we see for this supplier, we've invited them to 25 events. They submitted bids for 9, they've been awarded 0, right? So not a great supplier for us. Of course, all this information is available through our reporting module, but as you'll notice as we go through each of the different areas of our platform, we like to have visibility built in, right? We want to have all this information available to us within the supplier profile so we don't have to go searching for it. Next, I want to talk about supplier onboarding and forms. So this is how we standardize and streamline the onboarding and document collection process for our suppliers. And the screen here is going to show us all the forms we've sent to the supplier thus far. So forms are going to be templatized at the company level. And of course, you can have as many different templates in here as you want. So this is my template library for forms in my demo environment. And these are all of the different forms that I can assign out to the supplier. Once it's assigned out to that supplier, we can track the status of that form within the supplier profile as well. So for example, here for this business continuity form, we see that this is a finalized form. We also see this valid until date. So within our forms module, we have the ability to set up expiration dates. And what is going to happen is when this threshold approaches, we're going to get automated reminders both via email and in the platform that it's time to rerun this form for the supplier. Right? Again, this is just a way of us building in checks and balances into the system to ensure that we always keep that supplier information up to date. We can also see form history. So if you do have forms that you're updating on a regular cadence, you can always refer back to those previous forms here and look at the responses to them within the platform. And then finally, for forms, I want to talk about, we have the ability to set up approval groups and workflows within our onboarding module. So what I mean by that is for this business continuity form, after the supplier submits it, before we mark it as finalized, maybe it needs to go to the IT group for review. So we have complete flexibility to set up those different approval groups for different business units, such as IT or finance or legal. And then we can set up those workflows. So based off of something in this form or based off a category, it needs to go to this group for approval before we mark it as finalized. So you have a lot of flexibility in the system to do that within supplier forms, as well as in our contracts module. And then finally, I want to talk about performance reviews and action items. So this screen here is going to show us supplier performance over time. And we also use a scorecarding methodology to gauge supplier performance. So if you're comfortable building out those scorecards for the RFX process, you're going to be comfortable building those out for supplier performance reviews. Here we see their historical score. We see in Q3 they had a 92.6. Here are the individual sections of our scorecards. These are the KPIs that we're grading them on. And then of course, we can see if they're trending up or down in any individual area. So one thing I want to call out that's not shown here, outside of just doing these internal scorecard reviews, we also have the ability to send external surveys to our suppliers. So you can send a questionnaire or worksheet to those suppliers, maybe have them self-report on SLA attainment. We can also send the exact same scorecard that we're grading them on internally to them for them to fill out. This is a great way to see if there's a disconnect in perception of performance, right? They give themselves 100s across the board. We give them a low score. Obviously, we have a miscommunication somewhere. And we can capture and track all that information in the system as well. So really flexible in how we set up these performance reviews. And then finally, after any performance review or QBR, we're going to have action items and an action plan that we need to track against. So this is where we can assign action items for the supplier. Action items are very, very simple. All we need to do is give it a name and a description, an assignee, a priority, and a due date. And we're able to track and report on this in the system. right? So as these due dates approach, we're going to get notifications. And this is something that is really useful as part of a renegotiation, right? We've assigned you 10 action items throughout the life of this contract. You've only completed 3. We have the data to back this up. And this is fully transparent to both the supplier and your internal organization. So that was a very quick overview of how you manage suppliers in Scout. Just to recap, we're able to capture all the important metadata into the supplier profile so that you can easily sort and find the best fit supplier for your sourcing needs. We're going to give you the visibility into all the activity surrounding that supplier without ever having to run a report. We allow you to onboard and collect documentation from suppliers in a very efficient manner. And finally, we give you the tools to stay up to date with supplier performance as that relationship grows. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to turn it back over.
Great, thanks, Kyle. That was awesome, and hopefully you all saw from what Kyle showed us through pipeline sourcing and supplier management. Again, just how easy it is to to manage some of these things from a sourcing perspective. Again, whether it be your pipeline of projects, building out and drafting your RFX events, and even just having that view and visibility into your suppliers. So let's bring things to a close with some key takeaways here. So the first thing I want to just mention again and just really reinforce is the fact that Scout is really best in class for strategic sourcing. And again, hopefully it was quite clear from the slides I presented earlier, along with Kyle's demo, that we were really created with simplicity and ease of use in mind for the source to contract process, again, to really help drive that quick time to value and high adoption that we talked about. Second thing is, around the source to pay process. So again, with the acquisition of Scout, Workday, again, is able to provide really that source to pay process for our customers, providing some of those strategic capabilities in sourcing and supplier engagement that were previously absent from our solution set. And then lastly, we spoke about our short-term integration plans, but again, efforts are also underway to further unify Workday and Scout so that customers can rely on a seamless experience in the future, whether it be bringing together a similar look and feel, incorporating security business process frameworks and so on. These are all things that are part of our Power of One efforts. So that is all the content we have for you today. And, again, we really appreciate all of you tuning in. So we're now going to go ahead and dedicate some time to answer some of the questions that have come in so far. And again, if anybody else has, questions, please feel free to, input them into the Q&A box as we go through these first few. So I'm just going to start off here with a couple. So somebody asked, are there any additional integration points being explored between Workday and Scout other than the ones that were just mentioned? So I'll take this one. So as I mentioned, again, we are still exploring the opportunities that exist from an integration standpoint. Outside of the ones that we currently have on roadmap that we talked about, which was unified onboarding and the contracts integration, we don't currently have anything tied yet to a specific release. But once we do, we'll be sure to let you know and make sure that you're aware of those plans as we move forward. Another question here, how long does it typically take to deploy Scout? Do you have to deploy Workday HCM or financials first? So typically most of our customers get up and running with Scout within a matter of weeks. Again, it really depends on the scope of your deployment, the size of your organization, your procurement and sourcing team. So it can depend on a variety of factors, but generally speaking, in a matter of weeks. And as I mentioned earlier, again, we are open to supporting whatever journey you'd like to take. You don't have to deploy, financials first. You can obviously start with Scout. You can, then over time, revisit financials or procurement. And similarly, again, as I mentioned, we have many customers on the financial side or the procurement side that are now deploying Scout. So really whatever works best for your organization. Another question here, you talked about collaboration with the business. Do you need additional licenses for stakeholders to collaborate on projects? So the quick answer to that is no. So really only licenses are needed for your named users within the sourcing team, but stakeholders, we basically offer unlimited support for stakeholders and suppliers. And then another question here, Kyle, maybe I'll hand this one over to you. What PII is stored within Scout?
Yeah, so very minimal amount of PII is stored in Scout. The only thing that we require is the name and email address in order to create the user profile. And then that user profile information is only shared with other users within your company or suppliers that you invite to events. I have the Q&A open. There's one other question I want to address as I'm looking at it in regards to performance reviews. So the question is asking, do we have the ability to send out separate questionnaires to enable 180 and 360 feedback to suppliers? And the answer is yes. So we have the internal scorecarding piece that you would send out to your internal stakeholders to help grade that supplier. And then optionally, you also have the ability to send out those external questionnaires to your suppliers to garner feedback. And that can be structured in a couple different ways, whether it's questionnaire format, a worksheet, or just sending them the exact same scorecard that we're grading them on internally. There's another question that just came up, this good one about integration. Will Scout integrate with the Workday supplier portal? The answer is yes. So we do have that bi-directional integration right now through the Workday connector to sync the supplier directory in Scout with the supplier directory in Workday, which is going to be the vendor master. So if there are any additional questions about what's available within each portal, please put those in chat and we can answer those via email after this webinar.
Great. And I am also just seeing one other one around whether there is a similar overview or demo of the specific capabilities from a procure-to-pay perspective with Workday. So yes, we do have something available. If you actually go to the Workday site, and I'm happy to share this link with you after the webinar, we actually have a demo page where you can look at either a quick demo, which is basically a 3-minute overview of our procure-to-pay solution, or an extended demo, which is about 20 to 30 minutes long, which goes into detail on the specific steps in the procure-to-pay process, as we spoke about earlier. So that would be a great resource for you to learn more about the capabilities there. And of course, if happy to follow up with you to answer any additional questions or perhaps put you in touch with somebody from sales as well. So we will circle back with you following the webinar. So I believe that is all the questions that we received. Just quickly before I turn it back over to Lauren, I just want to highlight a couple of other webinars that are coming up in the series in the next couple of weeks. So on September 9th, we're going to have one around collaborative planning. And then towards the end of September, we're going to have a few additional ones on people experience. So September 23rd, what's new with Workday People Experience, on the 30th of September, an introduction to Workday People Analytics. So please feel free to tune into those if they are of interest to you. And again, the Look Forward webinar series, again, is just a great resource, again, for customers to be able to see what else exists in Workday from a platform perspective and see how your organization can, of course, leverage more with Workday. So that's all we have for today. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. And Lauren, I will just turn it back over to you.
Thanks both, that was really great. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. For those questions, I can see a couple that we didn't manage to get round to. We will answer your question via email. And if anyone else has any other questions based on what they've seen today, please do reach out to your account executive or customer success manager, or alternatively, you can reach out to Ahmed on ahmed.juwani@workday.com. So with that, thanks again to Ahmed and Kyle, and I'll now wrap up the session.